Hey guys, it's Selwen here. Island Expeditions is the new instance-based content coming in BFA, but what exactly is it and should we be excited? Well, Expeditions is gonna be a 3-man scenario in the same vein as the Mists of Pandaria scenarios. If you didn't play them, they are these mini dungeon-like instances where class roles don't really matter. So you could be running with 3 DPS without issues, but contrary to the scenarios, which were mostly focused on storytelling, here the expeditions will be about gathering that precious Azurite that everyone loves so much. So after you reach level 116, following the war campaign quests, which is basically your class campaign in Legion, a quest will be presented to you to gather Azurite for your forces. The way to achieve this will be to go on an expedition to uncharted islands where there's a greater potential to collect very high amounts of Azurite. To start off, it will be offered a small tutorial quest to go on an island, mine some Azurite nodes, kill some monkeys and gather enough Azurite before the Alliance or Horde arrives. Once that's completed, the island expedition content will be unlocked account-wide for any character above 110. Now, when fully unlocked, you will gain access to the expedition table near your faction ship, where it will be presented to you 3 islands. Currently there are 7 islands total in the game, ranging from tropical forests to swamps, snowy peaks and even volcanic. Out of those 7 islands, however, 3 will be randomly picked on a weekly basis to be run by players, which are also randomly chosen. You will then get the option to choose the difficulty between normal, heroic, mythic and PvP. Clicking on Find Crew will then send you on the queue list, much like an heroic or normal dungeon, but of course you can get some of your friends to run a pre-made or find a group of your own in the dedicated page on the group finder tab. The higher the difficulty, the higher the mobs will be inside, but also the higher the reward in terms of Azurite and other goodies. More on that in a bit. When you finally get into an expedition, it will start much like a battleground on a countdown timer. During this time, you can plan with your group on what to do, but honestly, who talks to randoms these days, right? A vendor will be placed in this area or ship as well, where you'll be able to buy some items to improve your team or yourself, be that HP related or damage buffs and the like. The goal here is of course to collect Azurite. On normal mode, it will be required to get 6,000 to win, on heroic 9,000 and 12,000 on mythic, but you won't be the only ones looking for it. Every mob wants that precious Azurite, but even more so your enemy faction. So in the middle of your Azurite gathering, you will be fighting indirectly or directly if either side decides to attack, and then whoever reaches the amount required of Azurite wins the expedition. The enemy faction NPCs work a little bit differently from regular mobs, with the so-called advanced AI, as in their tactics aren't as brainless or scripted. They can come up with surprise attacks, use CC and adapt a bit to the situation, but you shouldn't have too much of a trouble. If you decide to opt in for the PvP difficulty, however, the enemy faction will be played by actual players, which can prove to be more fun, but there's some issues. I'll touch more on that later. Now, how do you exactly get Azurite? Put simply, almost anything on the island will award it, and here bigger usually means better. From regular mobs to rares, elites, mining Azurite nodes, chests, satchels, and etc. The mobs on themselves work pretty much like mobs you find on the open world. They aren't that difficult to kill, nor could be, since this is role agnostic. You have to take in account that your group might be made of just DPS or just tanks or just healers. That said, having a tank with a group of DPS can go a long way to do big pulls, and as gear gets better, it will make those same mobs even more obsolete. To find the best locations of Azerite, however, you're gonna have to explore the map, because here it's using the fog of war mechanic from strategy games. You get these broad marked locations on a map of potential Azerite concentrations, but it's only when you get there you'll be able to actually see it on the map. So where you or your team goes will light up the same map, pinpointing to various Azerite nodes, rares, even the enemy faction or other locations of interest. But if you leave the area, it will become grayed out or frozen until you rediscover it again. So when you go back to a previous location of Azerite, the enemy team might have gotten to it. After 10 minutes though, all the locations will be revealed to both teams through the Azerite detector. Along with all the Azerite galore, you will also find small consumable buffs or shrines like the old scenarios had. These can grant buffs such as for damage, healing, and so on, something that you can take advantage of if your group is having difficulties. Along with those buffs, tougher mobs like rares will drop Azerite orbs to pick up, granting powerful buffs to your team for a few seconds, increasing damage and HP to up to 30%, so remember to gather those up. Now the islands themselves don't differ too much in terms of terrain, besides those 7 variants, or rather 3 weekly. That said, what you will find will be randomly generated, as in the mobs or creatures that you encounter, those sometimes can be trolls, Genu, or other times just be filled with dangerous wildlife. And of course, all the Azerite nodes and treasures will be randomly located throughout the island, like a cave to explore, invasions of Cavaldier forces, black dragons, old god minions, pirates, and so much more. In my case, Naga decided to invade the island for Azerites, completely changing the focus of my team to instead attack those Naga that were granting a higher amount of Azerite. Not only that, a mysterious portal showed up where the Naga appeared from. Going inside revealed of what seemed to be the entrails of a huge creature, and I quickly went to steal all of their Azerite reserves the Naga possessed. On top, there's still random quests or bonus objectives that can pop up, of course, granting Azerite as well. Even the randomized weather effects can somewhat influence what you do on the island, be rainfall, blizzards in the case of a snowy based island, or sandstorms that can reduce your visibility, or other minor gameplay effects, or just purely cosmetic. Like I said previously, the islands on themselves don't change too much, just those components. However, where you start from your ship can also be randomized, which does help keeping the islands fresh. So as you can see, a lot has been made to the island's expeditions to try and prevent them of becoming boring and repetitive, and for the most part it succeeded. Now, there is an event that seemed to be the same for every expedition, although I just might have been lucky and is completely randomized as well, but after about 5 minutes a big pocket of Azerite would spawn, much like those previous invasions. Along with it, huge nodes and a big Azerite elemental mob to kill, and a bunch of small little ones, of course granting the highest amount of Azerite on the island, about 2000, something that you should immediately focus on and forget whatever it is that you're doing. Interestingly, all the other mobs that are native to the island get CC'd to make your endeavor easier, something that does not happen with the invasions. This is where it can make the PvP difficulty thing a little bit frustrating, as the smarter team will always wait for the opposite team to make the move, be on these Azerite sort of invasion, be the other invasions or events. They will just strike out when the other team is busy or weakened by these rare and stronger mobs. That seems to be the most successful strategy, which can be somewhat frustrating and repetitive, or if both teams try to do the same and just becomes a stalemate at that point. Not only that, dying has some repercussions attached to it as well, as our character actually retains some Azerite as a debuff. So if you die, you're gonna lose a small portion. The same is said for the NPC enemy team, so it might be worth to kill them later on in the expedition for a big chunk of Azerite. And be careful if you do find the enemy ship, as you might be bombarded to death. And speaking of which, each expedition won't take too much of your time, as it lasts on average 10 to 15 minutes. Now, all of that looks pretty fun for the most part, but why should you care? Well, Island Expeditions is your biggest source of Azurite power, and don't be confused with all this Azurite labeling. The Azurite that you gather on the island is a resource of the instance itself. Azurite power, or AP, is a gameplay feature to empower your artifact necklace piece, leveling it up, making it more powerful, and unlocking the Azurite armor traits. How big is the Island Expeditions AP reward? Quite substantial, at 2,500 AP. For reference, a World Quest or Random Heroic can only grant up to 300 or so. Now, to get that 2k AP is gonna take some weekly grinds. Expeditions on themselves do grant AP, just like random dungeons. You get a small amount more so per difficulty, and the PvP variant even grants conquest points. But going back to the expedition interface, you'll notice the bar at the top. Reaching 40k Azurite will award you that big chunk of AP. Now, to fill that bar will require you to go on expeditions and win. Whatever you bring back, a portion will be added to that bar. Once completed, you get the reward, and then it resets on a weekly basis. So doing this every week will be something that you really need to get done, and the higher the difficulty, the easier this will become. There are other rewards besides AP, like reputation tokens, the doubloons to buy those consumables at the start of each expedition. Others can include weapons, mostly for transmog, mostly recolors, but I did get a fish mace, which is pretty fun, I guess. Gear stats, but once again, recolors, and mounts, which are mostly recolors as well, and some pretty cool pets. And it seems you can just spam them as well, although the rewards diminish a little bit. So all in all, is it fun? Well, personally, the few times I did it, yes, it was pretty fun. It felt quite different to any other content currently in WoW, and mainly due to so many randomized features, and all of that does keep things interesting and fresh. And there's thousands of variants that can happen every time you go into an expedition, much more than I covered. These are just a few examples. They feel quite dynamic, and there's a great potential here to make them even better over the course of BFA, on just adding more and more features like new islands and new randomized events, innovations, and etc. However, I can also see it becoming a nuisance after running it over and over again on a weekly basis, because again, you are kind of forced to do so. After a few months, will we be saturated of it, bored, or even worse, when we cap our necklace, will we bother running it anymore? I can also see overgearing becoming a slight issue and just kinda cheesing the hell out of it and just pulling the whole goddamn island. So all of that might drag it down a little bit, but as it stands, they are pretty cool and interesting. Will it be as engaging and loved as something like a Mythic Plus? Obviously not, but it's a pretty nice addition to the already present content, so let's just hope it stays relevant and interesting throughout BFA. And guys, that covers it. If you have any questions, do leave them down below in the comments, and if not, just leave your opinion on what you think about the Island Expeditions. Do you think it's useless content? Do you think that it's forcing you to do it even though you might not like it? And as always, thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, and hit that bell icon to get more videos like this, and check out my Patreon if you wish to support the channel. Have a fantastic day everyone, and I'll see you all next time. See ya.